We want to take a deeper dive into this story with Stephen Ganyard, ABC News military analyst and former State Department official. Thank you, as always, for joining us. First, just give us a bit of background on these long-range nuclear-capable missiles. This missile in this particular attack did not contain nuclear weapons, but in essence, it could have, correct?
It could have. This is a kind of a missile. It's a ballistic missile, and it really doesn't matter whether it's a long range or a medium range. But what I think is most important here is that it's not a weapon that's ever been used on a conventional battlefield, Linsey. So it's something that you would only use in a nuclear war. So those flashes of light that we see as these incoming warheads that were not armed, as you note, but could have been, it could have had nuclear warheads on them, were clearly intended to send a signal. Now, the size of the missile and the ability of the missile to travel long distances was called a medium range or an intermediate range missile, which means that Putin was actually telling Europe, this is the weapon that I could reach all of Europe with. It wasn't something that could reach the United States, and so very subtle, but it was very much intended to sort of pry away U.S. NATO allies away from the United States.
And previously, the White House had held back on authorizing long-range weapons in Ukraine for fear of Putin retaliating with nuclear weapons. So why did the White House and NATO change course and authorize use of longer-range weapons?
That's a good question, Linsey. You and I have talked about this, and one theory that I think is plausible is that they know that Mr. Trump is going to bring both the parties to the negotiating table very quickly after the inauguration. When Mr. Trump is President Trump again, he wants to get this war finished. Right now, the Ukrainians have only the territory in Russia that they hold, in that area called Kursk. That is their negotiating chip at the table. If they lose Kursk, which they could if these 50,000 Russian and North Korean troops overrun them, then they have no bargaining chips at the table when it comes time for negotiating the end of the war and who gets what. So the U.S. sees that the Ukrainians could get overrun. They could lose this bargaining chip. It's the end of the administration, and so they say, what the heck, let's allow us and also our European allies who've also provided these long-range weapons the ability to strike deeper in and behind Russian lines to hit areas of supplies, to hit areas of troop buildups that up until now the Ukrainians had no ability to do.
Putin was obviously trying to send a message with this nuclear-capable missile, but should we still be confident that he won't use the real thing?
I don't think so, Linsey. This is pretty spooky, and why I think it's particularly dangerous is he's run out of bluffs. He had this, and he demonstrated a nuclear-capable missile with multiple independently targeted warheads that didn't have nukes on them, but could have. So what do you do next to bluff? Could it be you demonstrate a small nuclear weapon somewhere in Ukraine to say, I'm done bluffing, and here's a nuclear weapon? The Pentagon has to be concerned. The White House has to be concerned because, again, he is out of ways to bluff.
We heard in Ian's reporting that the U.S. was warned of the attack shortly before it took place. How does that warning system work?
Yeah, what's most important here, Linsey, is that the Russians actually used a back channel means of notifying whenever there's a launch of a rocket. Why is this important? Because the U.S. has assets in space that sense rocket launches, and they can determine the azimuth. They can see how steeply the rocket's climbing. They can see the azimuth that it's on. And if they hadn't told the U.S., and the U.S. had seen a rocket that was ascending very quickly at a very steep angle, pointed towards the west, pointed towards Europe, and potentially towards the United States, that would have gotten people's attention in the White House in a heartbeat and would have scared a lot of people because you would have had to have put U.S. forces quickly on nuclear alert. And it's probably the most dangerous time in the whole Biden administration, and we're getting to the point where we're getting close to sort of a Cuban Missile Crisis degree of risk.
Wow. Okay. Stephen Ganyard, our thanks to you for your analysis as always.